the bait to screw other people in business or to take advantage of them in some way. They're kind of like bobbleheads to kind of distract people.
Well, he introduced him to Donald Trump. I mean, brought him to his property.
Oh, jeez.
And that picture of Trump and Epstein.
No, come on.
I know you're not allowed to talk about Trump in here. That picture of Epstein and Trump
Dude,
up
we
in the
spent so much
up
time
in the
earlier
Telegram.
talking
That's
about Donald Trump. I have a mute button and you don't. So let's
yeah, I
not
know.
go down
You
this road
guys
again.
censored. You guys censored.
Dude, you just got here. We've been having this conversation. We spent like 30 minutes on it earlier.
Nick, it's
having
handled.
this
Nick, it's
conversation.
handled. Don't worry. Just keep going.
I didn't know who brought him up. But anyway, yeah, so where's I going with that at this point? Oh, so Johnny, when it does come to other prime ministers, other presidents, because foreign presidents were mentioned in there, and I know that we did talk about prominent American politicians. Is it true there were 2 mentioned in there that were censored? Did I hear that correctly?
I'm not sure.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many were censored, but I can tell you that he's definitely right when he says that the royals are like their collection. This has always been the same with intelligence. If you investigate intelligence in the post-war years, even the pre-war years, they're all mixed up with the royal families and with the elites, because the elites have to be involved somewhere, otherwise they don't get the funding and they don't get all of the permission. And so they've got all of the permission, all of the funding, and yeah, the royals are fantastic in every country. It's not just in Britain; it's whoever they can get close to, and most are quite wise and savvy and interested in getting involved, but a load of them are very greedy and want more money, and so it's all a mixture of personality. But there's a lot of people on this party boat, and some of them are royal. But again, what Charles was saying, don't get distracted by too much by the royals. Andrew's a little bit different. You're being distracted by the fact of all the sexy stuff a lot more because he was doing arms deals for the British government, and that's quite an important part of his relationship with Epstein. I don't think it was as simple as most people make out. I think there was other things going on, because royals have influence.
And of course, nobody ever mentions Mr. Hess, right? Who is that big arms dealer from the UK? There's a lot of interesting stuff about Epstein running guns to Saudi Arabia on behalf of the British government, which of course is never really discussed. And of course, Prince Andrew was kind of a cover for that. So you have to be much more sophisticated than just they hang out together. Always look for the money, the drugs, the weapons. A lot of weapons stuff that needs to be kind of understood as well.
We mentioned that earlier, that they had ties to Adnan Khashoggi, which was gun running into Iran as part of Iran-Contra, and that Robert Maxwell and Epstein, who were both tied to the mega group, and the mega group founder was gun running to Zionist terrorist organizations pre-1948 Palestine. So the gun running is a big aspect of this, and the mafia involvement as well is a big aspect of this.
So just to kind of jump in on the other Prince story, I just want to we posted it. I put it in the nest. Thank you again, Stephen, for helping us identify that. So it mentions that other than Glenn Dubin, another person whose name was redacted, Prince Andrew, Jean-Luc Durnell, Bill Richardson, another prince, the large hotel chain owner, and Marvin Minsky. Is there anyone else that Ghislaine Maxwell directed you to have sex with? And this is talking to the victim. So it's another prince that's unnamed, plus the person whose name was redacted, which could be the prime minister. It could be one of the 2 prominent politicians that we discussed. So it's there's a lot of names right now. I think if we count and we assume that the name redacted here is not the 2 prominent politicians, we have 1 name redacted, which could be the prime minister or someone else, another prince, and then 2 prominent other politicians. That's 4 big mystery names that were removed, according to the lawyers, for matters of national security. Nick?
Yeah, so trying to get a little bit more detail on that. Hold on one second. Okay, so we're talking about a prince that definitely went to the...
Sorry, I was going to say Marvin Minsky. I'm not sure if you guys saw that. There's more information on him. Ryan, you talked about that already?
No, I didn't hit that one. I just hit Marvin Minsky's name was on the list of the people when listing the other prince. I'll look into Marvin to see if we can find other stuff about him.
I have some info on him.
Yeah, so
Is it
Yeah,
too?
he's been listed before. He's been accused of abuse even outside of this Epstein listing here. He's also from MIT, got a relationship with Chomsky, kind of connected to that whole area of Epstein's involvement in the tech sector and that genetic engineering research and that whole area. Marvin Minsky, definitely somebody to look up.
Well, Minsky was mostly interested in AI research,
Yep, over at
not
MIT.
genetics. The genetic stuff, a lot of the stuff about how he wanted to seed the planet with his DNA, that comes from a New York Times article. And we have to be very careful about that article because it was published at a time where the New York
Well,
Times,
we can see
which has
his
a lot of
investments
connections.
as well.
Yeah, you certainly can see it with 23andMe. He was very fascinated with genetics, and I can actually speak to that personally because I remember he recommended a number of genetics related books to me when I worked for Dershowitz. And so there's a lot of the Epstein genetics stuff that's fascinating. I mean, he certainly tried to set up a company to do interesting genetics work out of the U.S. Virgin Islands, but it's unclear that they actually did anything. More likely, he was more interested in basically making shitloads of money with the tech people, and the genetic stuff is not far enough along to do that at this stage.
You know, speaking of all of these prominent people going to the island, American politicians, princes, presidents, you name it. It seems like Stephen Hawking even being on the island. And then we know once Epstein got arrested the second time, the FBI raids the island, takes all of the hard drives for the surveillance cameras, and so there ends up being practically no electronic record, no video surveillance that we were ever able to see about it. But why? It seems like, I mean, does it not seem, Derek, that that would be like in the interest of the public to be able to see?
Isn't the idea
I
that
mean,
they flipped him? Isn't that the idea
I
that
mean,
they flipped him over to our own intelligence with the non?
well, I mean, personally, I don't identify with intelligence, even as if I live in the U.S. I don't know if they have our interests aside, but I mean, I would say that the reason that we're not getting this information, you ask, is this in the public interest? I think most of us would say yes, it's in the public interest to know this information. But I mean, if we take a step back and really wrestle with the fact of everything we've discussed here and all the revelations and information that's been known about Epstein now for years. I mean, again, a lot of this stuff isn't really groundbreaking, brand new information. We just have to contend with the fact that we're living in a world where this sort of situation is reality, where people connected to Hollywood, banking, intelligence, politicians, on and on and on, education system are involved in this kind of activity, and then really ask ourselves, like, okay, do we, just as one example, the elections coming up later this year, do we really think voting is going to change anything when we're dealing with this level of corruption, this level of extortion? And I don't have any faith that these systems of power are going to reveal anything when, just as example, I mentioned before, Jean-Luc Brunel, 60 Minutes exposed him back in 1988, and he wasn't arrested till after Epstein was arrested in 2020, and then whoops, he dies in prison as well. He kills himself allegedly. So I mean, there's too much at stake here for these truths to really rise to the surface and be accepted. I mean, this is why, again, what I said yesterday, 60 years plus later, the JFK situation, we're still waiting for dripping of new documents and new documents. Is the truth going to be in this set of documents? Is it going to be in this set of documents? And people are still writing books about it, but in reality, the information, the truth has been known just about that situation. All the there's so many researchers, so much available data, but that's not. It doesn't really change the mainstream narrative. Children are still being taught the lone gunman theory. Children are still going to be taught that Epstein, if they even ever hear the name, they'll be taught that he killed himself and it was just a fluke thing. And don't worry about who he was, selling, who his clients were, or who he was working with. He was just one lone person who happened to do this. It was a fluke. It doesn't happen. Move on with your lives, right? And they're writing the history. They're writing the narrative. Obviously, that's why we're doing this and we're trying to push back against that. But we really need to take a step back and realize this is much bigger. Somebody mentioned Agenda 2030 earlier. I hope there's a spaces on that in the future so those who are concerned about this can take a step back and realize that yes, intelligence is involved, and yes, there is a bigger picture, and yes, groups like the World Economic Forum do not have your best interests at heart, and this is much bigger than just one man, one situation, one case. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll go to Johnny on this one. Going back to what we saw, and we mentioned this earlier, how Alan Dershowitz negotiated a non-prosecution agreement with the feds for Epstein. How much of this stuff did we know before there was even any talk of prosecution? Were there any filings back then that gave us any significant information that people should have known that Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking children?
There was plenty of evidence that something was going on, but the evidence doesn't go anywhere in our systems, in our judicial systems, if there's no cases brought against people, if no one stands up. And the best thing about intelligence operations like that is that they are so completely scary. I mean, anybody who would go up against such a group of powerful, wealthy people must be crazy. That's why there's so many people who just won't tell the truth of their own experiences. So to find people who say anything is amazing, and that's what you need to go forward. You can't do it without people standing up and saying, no more, I'm going to do something about this. But that didn't happen here. And why? Because they're the most powerful people in the world, and we know it, but we're not allowed to speak about it because we live in a state of constant hyper-normalization where all of this stuff is just normal. We know it. We know they're corrupt. We know we're voting for corrupt people. We know we're corrupt ourselves. What's going on? Oh, we're pretending we're all nice. And so we live in a constant, every single generation. What was interesting to be said there is that I just heard there is that a lot of people don't realize that the scandals of the past, yes, they will fade with the memory, and they will become just a little line, a throwaway line. Oh, do you know in the Napoleonic War this happened, to counteract what was written in history? No one knows if it's true or not. Generations move on, and they use that against us. So I think it's a turning of time that they're using against us in this case, as they always do.
Yeah, I think it's a little different, though, if I could say, which is that so the non-prosecution agreement is negotiated between 2006 and 2008, and if you recall, in 2008, what came out, right? The iPhone, right? And we're now in a world where we can have these types of spaces where we can educate one another. We have Substack, we have LexisNexis, we have all this research we can do and we can bring to bear on these subjects, and we really couldn't do a lot of that maybe even like 15, 20 years ago. So a lot of these operations are getting blown up in different ways. You can see that with like the Me Too movement and all the Harvey Weinstein and all the weird stuff going on in Hollywood. And you can see some of the stuff coming now at Silicon Valley and in high finance. So I'm actually a bit more optimistic that there is some kind of accountability and justice, however delayed, happening now. And you look at like the amount of work or the amount of information that's at our fingertips where we can expose, bad actors, it's really kind of incredible. And I think it's just going to get bigger and bigger as time goes on. So it'll be much harder to run these kind of operations in the future.
I go back to the victims here, which are the young ladies that were involved. How are they protected? How are they kept safe? How are they kept immune from? I don't know if it's possible that any of these documents and any of these individuals can still cause harm. But is there a sense that they're being taken? So here's what I worry about. I would worry about if we're expecting certain agencies like the FBI to be leading investigations and breaking these systems down, which I'm not seeing happen, because I'm not convinced that they're not part of the system yet. And so it may not be in their best interest to break down what they've got going. But are those the same people that are protecting these witnesses and these young ladies?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things to think about is the degree to which the FBI and the FBI's counterintelligence division has been compromised, right? We saw this with Charles McGonigal, where he was like working for the Bosnians and the Russians and the Israelis and a number of other players. And we could also see this with the FBI. There's like all these fake whistleblowers that have come out, but there's also a lot of real ones too. And so the degree to which a lot of our counterintelligence apparatus is compromised in the United States, and the degree to which like we won't prosecute Israeli criminal activity in the U.S., like that's something that like we all have to contend with. And that's the reality of living in America now, is that there's a lot of people looking the other way on Israeli crimes. And we have people like engaging in Hasbara, taking tactics and training from the IDF and from other players, which is a violation of federal law. Like, you're not allowed to get talking points and regurgitate them from foreign governments. And yet we have that now in the United States. And the real question is, do we have a law enforcement apparatus that is going to actually go after some of these issues and risk that they might be called anti-Semitic, risk that they might be, harmed reputationally, career-wise? Do we
Oh,
have
jeez.
to do that?
You guys aren't going to believe this. There are a couple hundred more pages that just came out.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
God.
I'm dead serious. So, yeah, stand by, guys. We're going to keep going.
I'm glad I got 2 cups of coffee.
Have you guys already covered this, that the ages were ranged from as young as 12?
I believe it's 13.
Yeah,
Hang on a
that was the
minute.
first.
Hang
That
on
was
a
the
second.
first one.
I believe it's 13.
How many more pages came out, by the way, Nick?
No, hang on. There's another filing. I just don't know how many pages it is yet. It linked to. Okay, yeah. So there is another filing just now, and there are several more exhibits. I just don't know how many pages yet.
I got you, Mark. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. In the meantime, name redacted. Welcome to the stage.
Yeah, I keep hearing name redacted, so I'm not sure what's going on, what I'm missing.
111 new pages.
Yeah. So, Charles, I have a question for you, or Johnny. I don't know who wants to answer this, but when the Acosta plea deal, Alex Acosta in Florida with Epstein came out, I know Cernovich was one that did a FOIA, and along with someone else down in Florida, and then some documents were unsealed. And I believe it was under when Mueller was the FBI director. Was there something that came out in that FOIA that Epstein was actually an FBI informant? And then I see this video of Dershowitz today, and I think that was Eric Weinstein on stage too. And Dershowitz says, "Oh well, no, he wasn't connected to any intelligence agencies." So,
I believe a document just came out talking about Louis Freeh, who was the director of the FBI, being named.
How do you spell that last name? F-R-E-E?
F-R-E-E-H.
Well, I guess Charles left, but Johnny, I guess you've done some work on it. Or...
all I know is that rumor that Acosta said that he was somehow intelligence. That's all that I know about that part of it. I mean, it's really murky because everybody wanted to sweep everything under the table. Everything was heavily redacted, and everybody wanted to hide away from it and pretend it wasn't going to happen again. And then we're to where we are now, which is, like I say, the same sort of setup.
Yeah, in the meantime, guys, we're going
through the new drop. Yeah,
just to see if there's anything that sticks out immediately.
I can't find that name that you mentioned. Louis Freeh is not in the new docs.
But then, Nick, is that the link you've just sent? Is that the new drop?
It's at the top of that link, so you might have to scroll. I mean, you just look at the latest entry, and it'll.
Oh, okay.
Mario will tell you.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Okay. Yeah. So, in the meantime, here, let's go to. I brought up. Where did I bring up? Where do you go? Oh, David Riley. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
You're a radio host. You'd be, I'm sure you've been covering this pretty good. So.
Yeah, actually, it was Whitney Webb that kind of got me diving into this stuff. I first started reading her in 2019, and I can't recommend highly enough her book, One Nation Under Blackmail. She really did her homework and nailed a lot of it, and not just the sexual exploitation of minors, but also the financial crimes, which many believe that Epstein actually pretty much single-handedly triggered the 2008 financial crisis. He was leveraged about 17-1 through Bear Stearns, and he made some bad bets, and it basically forced Bear Stearns to go under. So there's a couple of articles on that. I'll look them up real quick.
Okay, great.
That's the first I hear of it. Epstein, Epstein didn't have enough capital to have that much of an impact, unless I'm
He
missing
was
something.
like I
David.
said, he was leveraged 17-1.
Yeah, but then again, everyone is leveraged on Wall Street. Like a 17-1 leverage shouldn't be too.
That's not even that. That's not too high, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But do we actually have any idea? I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but it seems like him being a money manager was just a front for this entire operation. I mean, he had to at least look wealthy, but how many of these clients actually knew what was going on? And and where did they think he was getting the money?
Well, I think you can look at the fact that if intelligence needs to move money, they need a man to move money, and who better than their own man? I think that's the real the skill of Jeffrey Epstein, that he had many strings to his bow. He was a jack of all trades and seriously a master of none. He could do a bit of this in the financial market with his friends to use the cover of a bank to move some currency for intelligence operations or the like, and skim off the top. I mean, I would believe that's what his role in banking would be heavily linked with intelligence and the funding of intelligence operations.
Yeah. Maury, I'm having problems with my. Oh shit, you're not. I'm having problems with my microphone on and off button, so I need to drop them back.
Rick,
I'm here. All good. Yeah, Rick can sort it out for you. I'm going through those files. Anything you've seen in that new drop, Ryan? I'm just going through it now as well.
I'm reading actually from top to bottom as well.
There's one here. Hi, Jason. Long time no talk. I've been. Okay, there's an interesting one here. I don't know what page that is. Page 82 that the team just sent through. Hi, Jason. Long time no talk. I hope all has been well for you and yours. I'm now back in the USA. Not too many people know about that, and I'd like to keep it that way as my case against Jeffrey Epstein has intensified. I'm here to get this bullshit non-prosecution agreement thrown out and speaking with Judge Paul Castle. He suggested trying to get a hold of any photos and or video recordings released by the FBI to assist our case further in proving how much pedophilia occurred by Jeffrey and the many other monsters he obliged with underage girls. I'm guessing it's one of the investigators. If there's a possibility, please let me know so I can give you Brad Edwards, my attorney's contact details. Many thanks for your time. I hope we should meet again soon.
This is Virginia.
Okay, that's Virginia Roberts.
Yeah, that's Virginia Gouffre.
Yeah, this is the victim.
Yeah, so, well, Johnny, why is Virginia... you guys were talking about Virginia as one of the main witnesses, about her not being as credible as many people are making it out to be.
Okay,
what is your concern with Virginia?
There's a couple of problems for some of the named witnesses, and it's going to come out eventually. I think that the whole case was built on a house of cards, so that things could be undermined when the time come. In 2019, Dershowitz was one of the hotshot lawyers of history, and he had just taken over the case. He had just been he was Epstein's arrested, so he's just on the case of trying to get him out. And I think they knew this arrest was coming. They needed to get him off the case. So there was a Maria Farmer, another supposed named victim, came forward with an affidavit that basically it's like Dershowitz came to the house and went upstairs with young girls who were all dressed as schoolgirls, and it was very interesting. But that whole thing was based upon Virginia Gouffre's complaint against Dershowitz, which she later went back on and said she must have got something wrong. And I think it was a play to get him brought off the case beforehand. And there's a lot of these plays. I really suggest that people look at the beginning of that case, 2013 and 2014. Virginia Gouffre has to get in bed with some really seriously bad people. I write about it in Pottinger Ultimatum, about the relationship there. Also, Maria Farmer, she was later to say a lot of really obviously anti-Semitic comments, and she also she's changed her story on multiple times, and she said she was in hiding for all that time. In actual fact, I found that in my investigations that she had a website called mariafarmer.com. She was on Facebook, she was on Twitter, and she was advertising her art in the gallery where she's supposed to be in hiding from the elites. The exact Guggenheim is there at the Take Home a Nude Awards. I think it's 2006, 2007, when Maria Farmer says she was in hiding and she wasn't. She was exposed to the actual people. There is a case here that has been undermined from the off. And I'm sorry, I don't know what Virginia Giuffre's real experience is. I know that she went through torment when she was young, and that put her on a road that meant she was easy to lure, blackmail, and manipulate into doing things that were against her best interests, against her ethics, and learn to maybe switch off something inside her. Go through, and we have to understand the nuances of abuse, how it affects people, and then what they go on to do afterwards. So it's a very complicated case. There's more than just Virginia Giuffre's testimony that needs to be questioned. It's a really unfortunate affair that I have to say that out loud, because no one really knows and no one wants to hear that.
Yeah, so it seems like...
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, there are a lot of, we're sitting here going through this. There are a lot of redactions in this one, it seems, which is, a lot more redactions in this one than we've seen in the other ones.
Yeah, I want to go on test. Sorry, not test. I want to speak to Brian. Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Brian, can you give us a bit more insight on how these drops work? Like, why the court's dropping it bit by bit? We had 2 or 3 drops today. I think 3. One of them was very small. We had one yesterday. Is it going to be like this for the rest of the month? I don't know how long it's going to be. Is it a month, Ryan, Nick? Was it over a month?
It's up until January 20th.
January 20th. So over the next 15 days, Brian, we're going to expect a drop every day. Is that how it works? Is that common?
Well, I'm not the expert on this. From what I've been hearing, I believe there should be another drop this Thursday. I haven't heard anything else regarding.
Can anyone else answer this question on how these drops work? Is that common? Johnny, Charles, anyone else?
They clean them up typically. So typically it goes through a process to kind of protect various victims, because obviously being named, basically there's a process by which they protect people's privacy and people's rights in these types of cases as they're revealing it to the public. And of course,
but why wouldn't they do it? But Charles, why wouldn't they do all the documents at once and just release everything?
It's a good question. I mean, typically when I've seen this in court situations is they release them as they're clearing them, right? So it's kind of like they have a batch, they go through that batch, they then check it, it's then released. It's sort of how it goes.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through some of the highlights just for the audience while Nick, Brian, and the team go through the rest of the documents that just dropped less than 10 minutes ago. So one interesting one here, I'm going to read it out. We read it already. I'm just going to do a bit of a recap. Prince Andrew was not the only prince that went to the island. Other than Glenn Dubin, Prince Andrew, Jean-Luc Brunel, Bill Richardson, another prince, the large hotel chain owner, and Marvin Minsky. I think that's the hotel chain owner. What was that the
Marriott,
wasn't it?
Hotel?
Hyatt. Okay, Hyatt.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else that
That's very likely.
Yeah, Pritzker.
It's very likely the
Pritzker, Hyatt.
right?
Yeah,
Pritzker's
Pritzker,
yeah.
So there's another prince. We're talking about Brunei being the Prince of Brunei
He was
being
Victoria's
one
Secret, I think,
possibility
right?
there.
Wasn't he?
The government was allegedly aware of victim Jane Doe. Number 3, when negotiating Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, which is a point that Ryan highlighted earlier. We're talking about whether Epstein was part of the Mossad, and we're talking about the interview with Ari Ben Menashe, who some of you, I think Charles and Johnny, both of you were a bit skeptical of things he said and claims he's made. But does not mean that, in your opinion, doesn't mean that Epstein was not part of the Mossad, but just means that particular allegation should be taken with a grain of salt. We've got a lot of stuff on. Actually, Ryan, do you have the amount of times Dershowitz and Andrew and others were mentioned? Who was mentioned the most in the latest drop? We're going to do it like we did yesterday. Yeah, we did it yesterday, and a lot of people found it interesting. I think yesterday the number 1 was Dershowitz again.
Dershowitz, yeah,
followed by
and then
Clinton,
the Prince and then Clinton.
Prince and Clinton were about the same.
Yeah,
But
76, 73.
I think the biggest thing for me today is so far for the drop is more allegations of Epstein having used this information for blackmailing world leaders. I'll read this one for example. Epstein also sexually trafficked the then minor Jane Doe, making her availability for sex to politically connected and financially powerful people. Epstein's purpose in lending Jane Doe, along with other young girls, to such powerful people were to ingratiate himself with them for business, personal, political, and financial gain, as well as to obtain potential blackmail information. It's coming from John Doe.